Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today with you. Beth, it's the first time I ever saw her speak. I've got one statement to sum up her presentation. Amen, sister. I agree with what she said. She's got a lot of energy. Tough act to follow. I'm going to, she talked about thinning, mid-rotation silviculture. I'm going to start a little bit earlier. We're going to talk about regeneration silviculture. We're going to talk about how you as a landowner may be able to improve your cash flow, save a little bit of money by adjusting some of the things that you do. Okay. So if you could, next slide. Stand dynamics. Beth was talking a lot about stand dynamics. She showed a lot of examples. But there are three basic rules I think that we all should understand about stand dynamics. Stand height at a given age is a function of tree species and a function of site productivity, whether it's inherent productivity or inputs that you add to the site through tillage, genetic, weed control, fertilization. Okay? With inter-tree competition, tree diameter is a function of the space per tree, of the area that trees have to grow. Beth showed some great examples in the last presentation of that. And then third, shortly after crown closure, volume or yield is relatively equal across a wide range of densities. Next slide, please. Okay, just an example. I'm using a research project that came out of the University of Georgia. It's a plantation of different densities. And it was planted in central Georgia. They followed it through age 19, reported here. And you can see from different densities ranging from 100 to 1,000 trees per acre. Height at any given age is relatively the same. Tree size, and I use diameter as a surrogate for tree size. Lower the density, the bigger the trees are. More space per tree, bigger trees. Next slide. Okay, volume per acre. With the exception of the two lower densities, 200 and 100 trees per acre, volume per acre, at least in this graph through age 14, is equal. Next slide. Okay, so just to demonstrate the three stand dynamic concepts. Okay, when you have regeneration, you're doing regeneration, you've got the component cost of site preparation, chemical or mechanical site preparation, land clearing type operations, soil improvement type operations. Planting, you have labor, and then seedling cost, and then herbaceous weed control. Next slide. Okay, so I'm making the claim that if you reduce your planting density, and if you plant when you plant trees, if you're planting fewer than 600 trees per acre, this is or if you're over 600 trees per acre, this is for you. If you're under 600 trees per acre, I'm preaching to the choir. But so in this example, we have a base of 680 trees per acre and 8 by 8 foot spacing. And say if you were to move down to 435 trees per acre, that's a reduction of 250 trees per acre in this planting. Your site preparation, let's assume you do a broadcast herbicide treatment, $70 per acre. Your hand planting, and let's say that just 8 cents per seedling. And then seedlings are $70 a thousand, for 7 cents a seedling. That's 15 cents a seedling. So you save money by reducing that planting density down to 335. That's just the number I selected. But you're reducing seedlings by 250 trees per acre. That's a cost savings of $15 per 100 seedlings that you plant. Okay, or roughly $50 an acre. Next slide. And when I worked at Meade, when I started working with the regeneration programs at Meade, we were planting 725 trees per acre, 6 by 10 foot spacing. And over the early years, in my career there, we started moving that number down. We got to a point where we were real comfortable planting 600 trees per acre. And I knew that it was better to continue to move that number down, not just from a cost-saving standpoint, but from a growth standpoint and a stand health standpoint later on in the rotation. And part of my responsibilities there was to do some research as well. So we got to looking in the literature and understood very well that reducing planting densities was a good thing to do, but how do you arrange those trees when you plant them? And I was thinking, okay, with row-oriented silviculture, where you're bedding, we were doing a lot of upland bedding at the time, where you, if you're not familiar with that term, you're making a continuous mound across the site, planting trees on top of that mound. There was some subsoiling going on. We were doing herbaceous weed control, treating single rows at the time because of our topography of our land demanded to do it that way. So we figured, okay, we spread these rows out. Every time you spread the rows out, it reduces your cost by a certain amount. And we were also interested in, of course, tree size over time and volume. So I set up this study, and we looked at different planting spatial arrangements at a common density, 600 trees per acre, and we had a 9 by 9, which is roughly a 1-to-1 ratio, row width to distance of trees between rows. And then we looked at 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4.5, and then we got to what I thought was an extreme at the time, an 8-to-1 ratio, where we had a 24 by 3 foot spacing. Next slide. And this is just an illustration of the study when it was age 5. That's a 10-acre portion of the field that you can see here some of the wider rows, the 24 by 3, and then down here some plots with the more square spacings. My oldest son, 2 years ago, he was about 4.5 feet tall in this picture, and just to demonstrate what the different treatments look like. That's a 1-to-1 ratio. In between rows is always on the left-hand side, and within rows on the right-hand side next, please. The 2-to-1 ratio, rows are getting wider, trees are getting within the row are getting closer. Next, 4.5-to-1 ratio, rows are getting wider, and then the 24-to-3 spacing, or the 8-to-1 ratio. Okay. So you can see that there's a lot of open space in those wider row spacings. We were concerned about branch sizes and the occurrence of branches, retention of branches. We're concerned about tree size and volume growth. Again, height, the trees averaged about 30 feet tall, same across all different treatments. Diameter, there's no difference, statistically there's no difference in this. There's tree diameter, these trees are 9 years old when they were measured. No difference there between the different spacings. And then volume, there's no statistical difference in volume at age 9. And that's cubic feet per acre. Next, please. Number of branches in the first log, 17.5 feet. We just counted the number of branches. Most of these branches were dead, but they represent knots, either tight or loose. And there was no difference in the number of branches. We did use a single family seed source, so there was some similarity in the genetics amongst the trees. Branch size. Branch size is very much controlled by the genetics. But we looked at, in the first half log, we looked at the diameter of the largest and the next largest branch. We measured it. And across the treatment, there was no difference across the different treatments in the size of the largest branches. They averaged about 1.5 inches. And And then the second largest branch was about 1.2 inches. Next one. And then crown width. We measured crown width in between, going parallel to the rows, and then in two directions, going with the rows and against the rows. And crown width in the 1-to-1 ratio, we had essentially had very tight crown closure. That's an 8 by 9 foot spacing, and the crowns averaged 10 feet in both directions, more or less. You come out to the 8-to-1 ratio, and that's 24 feet between the rows, and the crown only occupied 15 feet in between the rows. So you had some more, a little bit more open stands. Next slide. Okay, going back to the planting density example, we've got the second one here, and I've added the treatment to it, bedding. And that's a row-oriented treatment. And we're going from 680 to 450 trees per acre. And we had $15 savings by reducing our density. And now when we have the bedding treatment, we've got an additional $7 saving by reducing, by widening the rows just from 8 feet to 10 feet. Okay? And when you do that, you have to remember that there is some fixed cost to a contractor or somebody doing that work of getting to the site with their equipment, doing it. But then after that, you account for that fixed cost. It just boils down to the amount of time spent going across the land. So if you're going across every 8 feet versus every 10 feet, if there's less time, time is money. Next one. Okay? Oh, go back one. Okay, so now we're 450 trees per acre. Let's rearrange how we plant these seedlings. Okay, we had a 10 by 10 foot scenario, $217 regeneration cost to do herbicide site preparation, bedding, tree planting, labor and seedlings. Okay. We move that to a 16 by 6 foot spacing. Increase the row width by 6 feet. Keep the density of trees essentially the same. We come up with $193. Okay. That's in my example here is a $4 reduction in site prep cost, regeneration cost per each foot that you move out. Again, just what we've seen is by making these two simple decisions to reduce your density, you've gone from 681 in an 8 by 8 foot spacing, $272 per acre, and then moving to a 16 by 6 foot spacing with 450 trees per acre, $193. That's a $79 savings in your regeneration cost. Roughly 30%. And at the end of the day, you wind up, when you get to the mid-rotation age, with essentially the same yields on larger trees, same volume on larger trees. When you're ready to do your thinning, you'll have bigger trees to cut, which is, in my experience, favorable, more preferable to the good logging. How can you make it work for you? Everybody has a different situation. I think that anytime that you have a row-oriented treatment going on a piece of property, bedding, where you're pulling a bed or subsoiling, machine planting, banned herbicide applications, and even if you get to wide rows, even some of your land clearing activities, you have to do that. Shearing, just shear the path that you'll be planting and leave the debris off to the side, or even mowing or chopping just to get rid of some residual brush. Just mow that path or the strip through the area that you're going to plant and leave the inner row area alone. Let the herbicides deal with it. when you do your site preparation. But where you really have to work to save the money is when you're doing your negotiation with the contractor, if you do contract work, and understand how these principles can help you, how they affect the cost of the treatment, and then ask the contractor to give you some of his savings when they have to go across their land, your land, less frequently to get the job done that you want to do. Okay? Again, I mentioned that there are other benefits. Beth, in the last presentation, talked about picking the right trees. But if you have wide enough rows, 16, 18 feet wide, it is possible to do pure selection thinning. Okay? She was mentioning the fifth row thinning. In the fifth row thinning, you're taking out automatically 20% of your potential crop trees. Okay? With a pure selection thinning and the right logger, you can leave all of your crop trees. You take no potential crop trees. You focus on taking the defective trees, the smaller trees, and leave the absolute best. Certain sites, wet sites in particular, are sites that have poor access due to poor county roads or wet county roads. I think would benefit from going to a wider row spacing. It gives you a broader window where we can get in. We started doing this at Meade on some of our sites that were too wet, with the idea that we didn't have to thin those stands. We couldn't get into them at a given anytime we wanted to within a 3-year window. We'd just plant them at a lower density, push the rows out, and get by without doing the thinning, or have a broader window to do our thinning. And then there's other benefits, wildlife benefits of having a lower or a longer time between before your crown closure occurs. In conclusion, next slide, is the regeneration cost lowered by planting fewer trees on wider rows. The yield is the same, but your value will be higher because you're dealing with larger trees. And then, of course, there are other management benefits and wildlife benefits.